My name is Rachel Best. I work with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation as part of their marketing and meetings and events team. I'll be helping to moderate today. We've got a couple subject matter experts that are on the line to help with the webinar content and Wisconsin Innovation Grants information in general. And hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions and make the application process as smooth and easy as possible. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started, please, is we'll be doing the chat function, and everybody can see that to the right. If you're not familiar with Zoom, there is a button at the bottom that shows a little speech bubble and chat, and you guys can type your questions in there. We'll be holding all questions to the end, but if you get so excited that you are afraid you're going to lose or forget about which question you have, go ahead and pop that in the chat whenever you think of it, and I'll keep track of that for the open question and answer point at the end. Also, excuse me, in addition to recording, we would ask that when you're not speaking, which would be most of you, if you could please make sure to keep your microphone mute. If you're not sure how to do that, you'll see a little button in the left-hand corner, or sometimes it appears at the top, the little microphone, old-fashioned microphone icon. You would click on that and mute, and then a slash would come through it. Or sometimes you'll be able to do that from your phone or your headset directly. Again, additionally, if you have questions, go ahead and use the chat function. If you're curious and want to see the different views, you want to see the PowerPoint screen bigger or the speaker bigger, go ahead to the upper right-hand corner and you'll see a button that says view with 9 little squares next to it. That just changes the view for you, not everybody, so feel free to change that to whatever your preferences are. Last housekeeping note before I turn it over is you can see that my name shows up as Rachel Best with WDC. You guys can also update your name as it appears on Zoom by hovering over your name and right-clicking. And it's helpful if you put your full last name, first and last name, as well as who you're with. And that just gives us a little more context about who we're working with and who we're talking to in this virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting where we might be able to just know that by default. All right. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to Ray and Laura.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Laura Doolin. I am a policy initiatives advisor at DET and helped contribute to the creation of this grant program back in August during round 1 and have helped update it for round 2. I'm joined by Ray French, my counterpart at WEDC, and we'll be walking you through the slides today. To get started, I'll welcome Secretary Amy Pachacek and CEO Missy Hughes to join us and say a few opening remarks. I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura. I am so excited to see so many folks here today. We are absolutely just thrilled to be able to offer another round of the Wisconsin Innovation Grant Program. Governor Evers really announced this several months ago, back in August, or I actually believe it was back in July. And we knew then that during the post-pandemic recovery, we had several folks that still wanted to come and join the labor force and join the workforce. And yet those individuals throughout our state were still facing barriers. And Secretary Hughes and I went around the state. We spoke with employers, we spoke with educational groups, we spoke with job seekers, we spoke with entrepreneurs, and basically we heard lots of themes that there were barriers that existed that had been exacerbated by COVID-19. And these included things like lack of affordable housing and lack of transportation and lack of childcare, lack of broadband, and many, many other things. And these, even though they were a common theme, certainly varied based on a regional and local economy, and some things were more severe in certain areas, and certainly solutions that might be needed in Milwaukee could look a little bit different up in La Crosse. And so the governor developed the workforce innovation grants, which are up to 10 million per award, to encourage local and regional collaborations to overcome some of these existing barriers. And even though right now we are celebrating the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the state, the absolute lowest, We know that there are still folks that want to join the labor force, and there are employers in every single industry that are still trying to fill vacancies and having a hard time recruiting due to the labor and worker quantity shortage. So the first round of this grant has been a huge success. We are so excited to be able to offer the next round, and that is in collaboration from the Department of Workforce Development with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. So with that, I'd like to introduce Secretary and CEO Missy Hughes.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Secretary Pachek. Secretary Pachek and I have been on the road together, traveling around the state to visit the 12 awards that were given for the Workforce Innovation Grants in December. And we've had the opportunity to really dig in and understand what those grants were, what the projects are, who's working on them, and I cannot express to you enough how much we enjoyed having a chance to sit down with the award winners and hear, what challenges they're facing in their communities, how they prioritized, and how they came together to work on these projects around the table together. We are ready to head into the second round of applications and the second process. And I really encourage you to take a minute and look and see what kinds of grants were awarded in the first round, not because we're going to repeat that, but because you'll get a sense of the collaboration and the innovation that those folks brought to the table. And it really is exciting to see all around the state how teams are coming together and putting together their very best ideas and putting aside each of their individual thoughts and needs to really work as a group and say, what if we did this? What if we brought training to rural schools rather than making the rural schools come to us? What if we really rethought rural healthcare? What if we thought about how to really remove an obstacle like a lack of a high school diploma for a population? How would that really change the game? And those what if questions then transitioned into grant applications, and we were able to provide the support. So I'll be really interested to see what this next round of applications looks like. I very much encourage you to dig in and think about, think big and think how you can really make a difference. So it's kind of hard, right? Thinking big and then thinking about how you can make a difference in one individual's life, or bringing that workforce to the table. So we want to dig in and have a chance to really talk about what this next round of applications look like. Our goal, as our goal was in the first one, is to make these as straightforward and transparent as possible, to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity to get their grant in, and really providing the same information to everybody. And that's what we're doing with this webinar, to really level set everybody and provide the same information at the same time. So with that, I think I'm not sure whether I'm turning it back to Laura or Ray, but Laura and Ray are your team on this, and we can't thank you guys enough for stepping up to lead this next round of applications.
Thanks, Missy. All right, so some of the topics that we're going to be diving into today, A and B program overview, as well as overview of the materials available on the websites. Is going to be a little bit of a review from round one if you participated in the webinar back in September, but we just wanted to provide a reminder to all applicants about what materials and resources you can use to help you build your application and where those materials are located so that you can easily access them when you need to. After that, we will dive into a review of key elements. And this is really based on any changes that we've made between round one and round two to our processes, as well as some commonly asked questions that we received from multiple applicants during the first round that we thought might be helpful to provide an overview for you today. Lastly, we'll have some time for question and answers, and Rachel will be able to lead that based on the questions that are coming into the chat throughout the presentation. So please use that chat box, and she's gathering those questions, and we'll group them together and ask them to both Ray and I to respond to the best of our ability at the end of the presentation. All right, so just an overview, the purpose of the program, really some 3 core goals that we're focusing on addressing with this funding opportunity. Supporting the implementation of collaborative and innovative plans to create family sustaining careers. And I'll say, as was the case in round 1 of funding and as is the case in round 2, collaborative and innovative are the 2 key words there. We want to make sure that folks are partnering with local resources, subject matter experts, industry partners, education partners, et cetera, whatever is appropriate for your project, and that you're not, you know, continuing projects that are already in process, but building new and innovative plans to address the workforce challenges in your region. Second, assist regional partners in funding workforce development efforts. Again, this leads to that collaborative piece that we mentioned earlier. And the third goal, utilize existing relationships and forge new ones to leverage funding and encourage the development of coalitions. I think this is really important. Workforce touches so many different groups, whether that be childcare, whether that be healthcare, whether that be transportation, as well as workforce and economic development. Many of us have our own pots of fundings, and we don't really know where there's overlap or opportunity for us to collaborate. Just by getting partners involved in these projects, we hope to spark some of those conversations so that these partnerships not only are created by this grant program, but can continue into the future where funding can be leveraged going forward as well. A few other purposes of the program that I'd like to touch on, presenting evidence-based solutions that are reasonably related and proportional to the pandemic-related impact of your project. Evidence-based is definitely a theme for DWD. I can speak for our agency, and I know WEDC moving forward, making sure that we are having data-driven decisions behind the projects that we're funding. There's lots of resources available to you in your regions to find that data and leverage it appropriately to tell the story of why this is a challenge in your region. And we definitely want that included in your applications. And lastly, considering how the proposed solution supports populations and communities disproportionately impacted by the health emergency. WEDC's program website is going to be where you find most of your resources as you're building your application. And this has not changed from round 1. All of these resources and materials are available for you to download, review, read, reread. I will encourage, and this is going to talk about the program goals that we mentioned, a description of the program, but also the hot, I would say the hot hitters here, FAQs. We're constantly updating these on a regular basis based on the questions that we're getting from potential applicants. Webinar recordings can be found on this website as well, so you can share this with any partners in your region who might not be able to join the call today, as well as the webinar for round 1, I believe will also be available on that WEDC website going forward so that you can get a deeper dive into the programmatic requirements as we provided that in the first webinar, as well as the grant application guide. And this is a comprehensive checklist almost for preparing and submitting your application. It talks about everything that you will need to submit, any attachments that you'll need to have prepared, letters of commitment, et cetera. It really walks the applicants through what is necessary, what are the guidelines of the grant, and how to best submit your application. We also are utilizing our partnership with DOA and their program website to submit an application. So when you are ready to submit, there is a link from WEDC's webpage that says submit an application, and it takes you here. We're utilizing DocuSign, which is hosted by DOA, in order to submit your grant application. There's this great link that says click here for application instructions and links. Again, this is very similar to our application guidelines, but is going to be a very clear checklist about what exactly do you need, what links do you need to click on to get the necessary documentation and materials. I am going to strongly urge all applicants, and I'll repeat this as many times as I can on the webinar today, to use this resource when you're submitting your application as a checklist, going through each section and saying, yes, I have this, yes, I have this element, or maybe I'm flagging this, I don't have this yet, my application is not ready to submit. So please use that resource. It is available. Any questions that you have, again, your program contact is listed there, workforceinnovation@wedc.org, and the program website has all of those resources before you are ready to submit your application on this DOA program website. So timelines, some important dates as we get started into round 2. Launched all of those resources last week, the week of February 7th. Our introductory webinar obviously is today, you're all here. And then the dates that you really want to hear about: application submission deadline, no later than 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on April 15th of this year. That'll give us plenty of time to review those applications, and hopefully we'll be making award announcements, I would say early summer of 2022, but to be safe, we're going to list summer of 2022 to be able to get those funding announcements out to applicants and make those announcements publicly. Submitting an application. Again, this is the checklist items that you will find in your application instructions on DOA's website, but you'll definitely need to have, let me go forward just one, there you go. Your application instructions PDF. Again, this is a checklist. It talks to you about the application form, any attachments that you might need, as well as narrative and any particular forms that we need to submit for IRS purposes and due diligence purposes as well. To make sure that the review process on our end goes smoothly, we ask that you have all of these documents, attachments, et cetera, included in that application, which is why we ask that you follow the instructions PDF to a T when you're submitting your application. But just again, a reminder, applications due no later than 5 on April 15th, and then we will be using DocuSign again during round 2 for application submission. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Ray from WEDC to dive a little bit into the review of key elements for round 2.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Yeah, as Laura said, I'm Ray French, a Regional Economic Development Director with WEDC covering Western Wisconsin, and I'm honored to be able to help out on this project and this program. So I'll go through more on the eligibility, the projects, and the application. Based on what we learned in round 1, we've updated a lot of the application to flow a little bit better, but the core fundamentals of the program are still the same. So for eligible projects, again, we're looking for what is the most pressing workforce challenge of your defined area, region, especially a challenge that has been caused by or exacerbated by the pandemic. So with the ARPA's final rule, we're trying to be even more clear throughout the application that we're looking for how you're responding to that COVID challenge. One question you might have for eligibility is about maybe the industries for the projects that you're targeting and the workforce challenges. Again, start with that, identifying your workforce challenge, and that can be through any industry. It doesn't just have to be skilled trades or commercial drivers. Arts, social services, professional services, et cetera, are all welcome. Again, how you design your project that responds to the COVID-related workforce issue is what is going to carry the weight through the program here. Slide. So given the length of the applications and the steps of the review that we have learned through round 1, we're allowing a little bit greater time in that review process. So as noted, the applications are due April 15th by 5 p.m. Then there will be a time of reviewing the budget and attestations. Note that that applicants must be able to answer all those attestations questions on behalf of all your subrecipients. If you applied in round 1, you'll note that this time we've combined the due diligence and attestations forms for simplicity and to reduce the chances for error. You won't be able to supplement your application after the application deadline. However, if you do submit and need to change something before the deadline, please just email us at workforceinnovation@wedc.org to let us know that you are resubmitting, so we know, the correct one to be reviewing. Again, this is a competitive application. Unfortunately, we're not able to have maybe the back and forth or kind of that discussion throughout the process that you might be used to on some of our other WDC grants. But please don't hesitate to send any questions you do have to that same WEDC email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks. All right, so we again want to note the performance reporting requirements of grantees. We changed the application again to better tee up this kind of information. So the budget includes sections for providing kind of the stage expenditures that relate to the activities and outcomes in each of the calendar years of funding. So we want to see that on the front end, how you plan to carry out the project. And again, that should help you identify those steps of your project in the performance reporting if you're project is awarded. But the performance reporting will go through a number of those, likely to include the narrative, the itemization of expenditures, participants served, and the demographic information of those project participants. Next. All right, so here are the top level sections of the grant application. They're roughly the same, but in some cases reordered. The points are also listed here and updated from round one. Please note that the rubric used in the judging process is also posted to our website. So you can see the criteria and the points weight for each of the questions and sub-questions. We did break out a lot of our questions to make it easier for how DocuSign works and being able to make sure we get all of that information in on the front end. So we're not having to go back and get it a second time. But the application guide has the questions, and we're working to have that application form PDF that Laura was showing up on the website by next Tuesday, the 22nd, when the round opens. Just note that I am aware there's a repeat in the guide for one of those sections of these questions that will be fixed by early next week as well. The biggest change to the application is that we've changed the logic model and replaced it with more of an activities and outcomes section for each of the calendar years. This really gets at what we want to know for what you're doing and what you're going to achieve. We moved the budget to follow that section to reinforce that the budget should reflect the information in each of those calendar years. So as you fill out your activities and outcomes in each year, the project budget expenditures should then tie to those activities by calendar year. So part of this, again, is to help with the eventual administration of the grant and for when the funds will be dispersed. But we hope it makes sense for those sections and how they should work together. We also adjusted the weight of these sections to put more emphasis on the workforce need and the project description and a little bit less on the budget. We also want to emphasize the importance of partnerships and collaborations, as well as the applicant's capacity to be able to carry out the project. So again, that should all be clear as you review the rubric and see how we're scoring these questions. Next. This slide is mostly the same as the round one slide, but it's important to note that we now have the ARPA final rule, which is allowing for a little bit more flexibility and clarity to what's fundable. The application does also include a new section for capital expenditure justification. This item won't be scored, but it is needed for ARPA reporting. So if you're proposing a capital expenditure of over 1 million, you'll need to provide additional justification for that expense. So why is this capital expense superior to other alternatives? And just to note that this isn't a requirement for applications from tribal governments. Next. As stated, approximately 41 million is available in round two. Awards will be made between 250,000 and 10 million. Don't worry so much on making sure that you get a certain amount that you hit. You know, are we looking for 1 million, 5 million, 10 million? That really, I wouldn't worry about that. What's most important here is that you have identified a workforce need and designed an effective, collaborative, and innovative solution to it. If it takes 1 million or 10 million, this is how much it takes. It's important to note that we're still holding applicants and subrecipients to the $10 million maximum. An applicant and awardee of round one can lead another collaboration or be involved in round two, but if awarded, they will still be limited to a cumulative total of 10 million across both rounds. And that's the same with any subrecipient too. The second question here gets at what I was saying a minute ago, that we're trying to get clear information in the front end of the application to help plan the disbursements throughout the program and the project as the progress is made. So now you have the opportunity through this to better plan out your activities and outcomes by year and the expenditures associated with those in each calendar year. So that's about all for my planned remarks. Again, encourage you to please consult the FAQs, which we'll be updating again for next week's go live dates of the application on the 22nd. We'll have that application checklist posted. One important FAQ I want to acknowledge is number 28. And the question is, we applied in round 1 and were notified of our non-award. Is there feedback we can receive to improve our chances for a round 2 award? And our answer, specific feedback on your round 1 application will not be provided. Applicants are encouraged to review the updated program guide and rubric and consider ways to improve their application to meet the purpose of the program and directly answer the applicant questions. I think as it was stated, we're trying to be a lot more transparent with exactly what we are looking for as we're reviewing and scoring these applications, and how to write your application to match that in a way that follows what we would expect for really a project that can be supported. So again, just take a look at those and review those, reread those. And I think should answer a lot of those questions. And again, lastly, applicants will need to verify those attestations for their subrecipients. That is very important as we do our initial review post-submission deadline.
Thanks,
All right,
Ray.
thank you. That's a lot, so happy to take any questions.
And while Rachel's getting our first question ready, I just need to do a big shout out for Ray, thanking him for all his hard work on updating our internal processes. He did not participate in this process on the front end in the round 1 and has really just come in round 2 and knocked it out of the ballpark. So thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, Rachel, what do we got?
Thank you. All right. Some good questions. I think we have some more general questions from people that maybe did not submit to round 1, as well as some that did. So let me start with, where do we find those current awardees? And let me make a note of that when we send a follow-up email, we'll make sure that we point out a link directly in that email that you'll receive from us to get ease in getting you those answers. But Ray, Laura, anything more about where to find that list of current awardees or what they should be reviewing to get inspiration?
I believe we do have a joint press release from both of our agencies that lists both of those awardees. And Ray, maybe that's something we can get updated to the program website as well, just as a reference point for potential applicants. But
Yep.
Rachel can definitely send that link out in an email following this presentation as well.
Yep, I think it is linked there now, but we'll make sure we'll call it out.
Perfect, perfect.
Yep.
All right. Can proposals apply to or span multiple regional economic development regions and partners?
I think the answer to this is yes. Really, you are in charge of defining what a region is, and that might be as large as, northern Wisconsin. It might be as small as the Green Bay metro area. That's really up to you to decide. It's just that the workforce challenge needs to be a workforce challenge in all aspects of that region. And so if, Northwest Wisconsin shares an issue with parts of North Central Wisconsin, and they want to tackle that workforce challenge together, I think this is a great opportunity for them to come together and collaborate, even if it does span economic development regions or workforce development areas.
Thank you. Can you clarify the difference between a subrecipient and a partner?
Sure. Subrecipient is going to be an organization that is receiving funding from the primary applicant. So let's say the primary applicant receives a grant of $5 million, and in their proposal, they say, we are going to funnel some of that money directly to one of our subrecipient partners. So a subrecipient is receiving funds directly from that primary applicant. A partner is someone who is working on the project, whether that be through just general partnership. They maybe share participants, they're providing some sort of resources, or they're just participating in listening sessions, councils, et cetera, to provide guidance or support to the project. Partners and subrecipients are both. We would love to have both of those types of partners on the project. So I guess the best way I can say this is that all subrecipients are partners, but not all partners are subrecipients, because not all partners may be receiving funds through this grant process, but they are still supporting the project in some way or another.
Thank you so much, Laura. I guess it falls underneath that a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square situation.
Exactly.
How about this question? Is the purchase of a technology platform considered a capital investment?
Ray, I'm not sure if I know the answer to this. I might punt it to you if you have more information.
I don't have enough to be able to say one way or the other, so that's something we'll have to follow up on. That's a good clarifying question. Thank you.
Yeah, we can always make sure maybe we can add that to our FAQs too. So
Perfect.
as we noted at the beginning, and you probably are going to hear it at least one more time before the end of this, the best place to go is to join. I'm going to put the website again out there because that's where our FAQs are. You can go ahead and get access to the portal to actually apply. Everything can be found through this one link. So if you're going to remember one thing from this webinar, it's the URL that I just typed in there. And as they mentioned, the FAQs are updated. If we get questions in either by this webinar or by email, when we think they're good questions and you're not probably the only one with them, we will update the FAQ to set as many people up for success as possible. All right. Regarding subrecipients, round one limited the number of subrecipients. Will that be the case in round two?
I don't believe so.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. There. Nice and clear.
Yeah. No.
And for the application materials that are currently on the DOA portal, excuse me, are they currently updated for round two versus round one?
I think we
Not
need
yet.
to double check. There's a few, I think we're hoping to get this updated by February 22nd, so early next week, which is when folks can begin applying. By the time you can submit an application, those materials will be up to date for your review and use.
Thank you. Just a clarifying question on the grant scoring rubric. Is that the equivalent of the grant checklist that you were mentioning, Laura, or is the grant checklist found in the application guide?
So the checklist is going to be on DOA's website. The application guidelines is another great resource, and the checklist draws directly from that. The rubric is going to be actually what our review panel sees when they're reviewing each application and provides a score to. So it has the weighted scores for each of the questions and sub-questions of each section of that grant application that Ray kind of walked through, whether that be project need, which is 25 points. But when you read through that application question, there's a few questions in there, and you'll be able to see a little bit better exactly how we're scoring all of the content that you are providing in that section.
Great. Just a general comment and question on feedback. How in the scoring and review by the judges, how are minority or diversely owned businesses, regions, ethnic chambers of commerce, minority firms, etc., are there different weights being given to that, or how will they be judged?
That's a good question. I'm pulling up the rubric now because I know that that's a factor and something that we're looking at.
And Ray, when you're pulling up the exact wording, as we talked about in the programmatic purpose and goals, serving individuals and populations who've been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic is a core goal of the program. And so we do ask in the grant application questions, specifically, how does your project impact those populations? And I think all of the groups, Rachel, that you mentioned earlier would fall under that question as we're trying to tackle, trying to weed that out of the applications that we're getting. It's definitely content that we would want included as it is part of the score.
That makes good sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, it is in that first section, the demonstration of need. If you're in the rubric, it's 3.1b, and it's specifically, again, identify who is impacted by the workforce challenge, including the impacts to underserved populations and or those disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And it goes on from there. But yes, exactly.
And just a reminder, that rubric that they're referencing, I just pasted the URL again. You can directly download that rubric sample from our website. Thank you for your response. I think you guys already answered one of the questions, that those that did not receive funding in round one won't be able to receive direct feedback as to why they didn't before submitting for round two. But somebody asked a great question then, how many applications did we receive in round one? And what were the main reasons that the main applications in round one were not selected for funding? Maybe we can talk about it in a general way.
Sure. I'd say I don't recall the final number, somewhere around 120 or more completed applications that were able to be scored. And so I think as we went through the review process, and I'd go back to kind of maybe a statement I said earlier, with that, just noting that this is a competitive process. So there were a lot of great applications that didn't get funded, and it just really came down to funds available, the scores, and kind of how everything shook out. And so the projects that best identified a need that was supported with data, and that designed a program, a project, had a collaboration, had experience in the workforce area that they've can show success in, and that was had a project budget that made a lot of sense for the program and project that they were describing or proposing. It's all those things coming together that really set them apart.
And I'll just add to that, I think as we put together the application questions, we're really looking for almost a narrative of what is your project's need, what is the why, and then the activities that you're proposing to fix the why, and the partners, resources, et cetera, that you have to complete those activities and keep the project going should funding expire at a certain point, right? And so that's really how we have weaved the application questions together. What is your why? How do you accomplish the why? And who and what do you need to accomplish the why? And those are really, as you're thinking about drafting your application, I'm hoping that our updated, like I said, we scrapped the logic model a little bit to be a little more specific with what we're asking in terms of project implementation. And so those core activities that you're proposing, how do they impact your project need? What is the workforce challenge that you are proposing is the most pressing in your region, and how do these activities impact that? And being able to clearly tie all these pieces together, as well as those supported pieces, like partnerships, like the capacity of your organization, like the sustainability of your project. All of that really supports those activities, which supports the workforce challenge in your region.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, just another common, some common things that we noticed, if you're proposing, or if you're identifying a workforce challenge in a certain sector, or, maybe a certain upskilling need, but the data you're showing is national. If you're saying, hey, we've got this problem over in Grant County or wherever, or in this MSA, but you're providing us data that is, well, nationally, here's where we're lacking something. It's harder for us to be able to judge that you really are demonstrating that need, and that you're designing something to address that specific need in your area. You may need that, you may have that need, but we want to be able to see that through the data that you're providing.
And as a reminder, that data is available on wisconomy.com, and you can drill down to your county for many specific data elements that can support projects. Additionally, through DWD, each region has a local economist that can support your project in data needs and requests that you might have. And all of that information is available in the FAQs.
Excellent. Since we do have a mix of participants that have seem to have applied for round one and now are thinking about applying for round two, and maybe are fresh and new to the Wisconsin Innovation Grants, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what a due diligence technicality is, and where you could find or get a better concept or definition of that.
Well, first, I'd point you to the program guide. So I think I'd mentioned that we have combined the due diligence and attestations. They were sort of getting at some of the same things. So for simplicity, those are really just one form. And those are those key items where we're looking at making sure that you've been in business for since January 1 of 2020, that you haven't violated any of unemployment compensation laws, or violated any other workers' comp, or anything like that. So in the program guide, those attestations are page 10, and so that's kind of the last stage of filling out that application, and it'll be in the application checklist as well. what those are. So again, applicants will need to make sure that those have been attested to, as well as for any subrecipients, as we will be verifying that before moving to the review of the applications. Laura, I don't know if there's more to add on how those got put together, but
nope, I think that's great. Yeah. And if you've applied for other grants at DWD or WEDC, that process is very similar, as we're making sure that organizations that we're providing funding to are in good standing with other state agencies.
All right. All right. Looking at some of the questions that might be best for the whole group that might have questions. Are technical colleges considered a government entity, or do they need to be registered with DFI?
Believe they are government entities.
Correct. Getting a nod and a yes from Laura. So technical college government entities, yes. Lots of feedback, more than one question or feedback came back through chat in regards to the word or character count limitations that were part of the round 1 of applications. Has that been resolved? Do spaces count? Do you want to just address that in general? And then I can add some follow-up questions if needed.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yes, so that is one of the big reasons why we've separated out the questions for this round of application. Wanted to make it very easy for you to get that in, to get all of your information in each of those boxes, and we don't have to go back to you. So each box will have a max character count of 1,750, and that does include spaces. So if you're writing it in Word or whatever, you put it in Word, no more than 11-point font, and then copy it over is just fine. But yes, we've made great efforts to get that resolved, and we're working very closely with DOA, who's been awesome and responsive with this to get that set up for this round 2.
And just as when you start to submit your applications, what Ray means by separating out the different application sections, instead of putting all of project need, which is 25 points in a single box, that's 750 characters, we've split up that question that is all still based on project need. So you have different boxes to fill up that 750 characters for each of the specific questions that we're asking. So you'll have more opportunity, and I hope it's more clear on the DocuSign application as well, to tell the story and answer the questions that we are requiring.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. And, as far as formatting with bullets and numbers and things like that, there's just a limitation to any system with that, correct?
Yep. And I would just say, don't just blindly copy, paste, and hit submit. Make sure that it looks nicely for those reviewers. If you're noticing that the bullets are not tracking, maybe you take out the bulleting formatting that you used in Microsoft Word and change that to, hyphen lists or something, which is going to look a little bit nicer in the text box that's provided to you on DocuSign. So I would say just a little bit of edit checking on the side of the applicant to make sure that the text you're providing is readable and makes sense, that when you did copy and paste, it was transferred over in a nice way.
And that raises a good point too, just from an administration standpoint. It doesn't hurt to write up your text, edit, proof it in a separate document versus directly in the box. That way you just have to copy and paste and then proof it a little bit again, and don't lose things if things time out or your internet crashes or all those other things of technology that we cannot control. Excellent. All right. What is the time frame for expending funds?
I believe it is 3 years after the funds are awarded.
Correct.
And that question is specifically called out in our FAQs as well. So you'll be able to verify that or revisit that question again.
All right. Is funding all or nothing? We have several components and partners. Could some of it be funded and not others, or all or nothing?
I'd say looking at the first round, I don't think that we went through the process of dividing up applications or components of applications. We're really looking at the whole program or solution to what's being proposed. So at this point, again, just focus on getting the right thing developed for the right budget that works for your project, and that'll have the best chance of being funded.
Great. Keeping up on the theme of funding, since federal indirect rate is not fundable, can existing staff who are normally included in the indirect cost charge time they spend supporting the project to this award? Can indirect staff, or excuse me, can indirect costs include existing staff supporting the project of this award?
I believe this is a question that is addressed in our FAQs. I don't have those pulled up in front of me, but off the top of my head, this might be something that if it's not in the FAQs, just to revisit via email, Ray, unless you've got that handy.
Yeah, so it's number 8. If we're looking at ineligible project costs, you know, I think as we're looking at, as long as the time that's being charged is new, as in, you know, we're not funding existing operations. It's anything that's going towards the new program. So I think we'll get clarity on this, but I think, you know, tentatively, I'm thinking that that is allowed. So as long as whatever's being charged is towards the new program, that should work. But check back on the FAQs for that.
All right. Moving on to some other questions regarding attestations. If somebody applied in round 1 and is reapplying for round 2, do they need to get new or different attestation letters?
Yes.
Yeah, if your project, even if it's like a similar concept, I'd envision that no one is submitting their application as is. And so the processes internally, some of the project elements, partnerships might look slightly different. And so we would ask that those be updated as you submit for round 2.
And in regards to attestation, this one's a little bit above my head, so hopefully follow with me, and because you guys are the program experts. But if required, the subrecipient is registered with the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions and has one of the following statuses as of the grant announcement closing date: restored to good standing. So this sounds like one of the questions that we're asking in the application. If the entity is not required to be registered, should the response be yes or no? Not applicable was not an option in round 1.
Right. So we did clarify that it's not explicit in the program guide, but when you go through the application itself, that is an option. There's a response for nonprofits only, or government entities only. So that is addressed so that there's no confusion this time around in the attestations.
All right. How is cost per participant considered in scoring, and are there prescribed minimums?
We do not have prescribed minimums because we are received in round 1 and anticipate to receive in round 2 a variety of types of projects. It's hard to nail down what a cost per participant could be like for a program that focuses on transportation versus childcare versus upskilling and training. All of that would probably, you'd run the gamut in terms of cost per participant. So we do not have a prescribed cost per participant. I will say, as we're reviewing budgets, we will just be reviewing that those are reasonable based on other projects in those fields.
Excellent. Can our region, or any region, be as small as a city of roughly 70,000 people, or does it need to be larger? Does size matter in the sense of the application and scoring?
No, size does not matter. So again, we're really just looking for you to identify your workforce need. And again, big or small, whatever that is, and the solution that you're putting together collaboratively with your partners to solve it. It's really as simple as that. And again, if you look at some of the first round winners, you know, of course, there were, you know, large regional grant funded, others were as small as a school district. So, you know, it really does vary. And again, this is a competitive program looking at the quality of the projects proposed to meet those workforce needs.
All right, another question. Can you please clarify or define wage, subsidy, and stipend?
So any wages. we cannot pay wages to employees in this program. And that could also include a stipend, for example. You might be paying, we see sometimes have questions about stipends for youth apprentices at DWD, and we cannot use grant funds to cover any sort of payment for service that is provided by a trainee, an employee, et cetera, that might be participating in this program.
Excellent. That seems very clear. Could this be used, or can this funding be used to upscale a successful existing project that is meeting workforce needs and serving large numbers of pandemic impacted individuals?
I think we don't want to necessarily rule that out, especially if this is a newer program. I think when we are talking about innovation, and we don't want to just be funding projects that are already in existence, we're thinking really about on the workforce side, some of like the WIOA funded projects and programs and standard federal funding that a lot of the agencies that we work with on a regular basis are already receiving. But if there is an opportunity for us to learn more about a new program that you are just starting and it's working on a small scale and you would like to draw that pilot up to serve a larger number of participants, I think that that could be a compelling application. Again, you just need to tell that story when you're going through the grant application questions. Ray, do you have anything else to add to that question?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Speaking of what funds can be used for, can funds be used to conduct an evaluation of a project for the purpose of institutionalizing or scaling up? So funds, I would say on their own, your project cannot be evaluating a project. That cannot be the only activity that you are doing. I think evaluation dollars could be included in a potential project, but ultimately in the course of the 3 years that funding can be distributed, there needs to be individuals who are being served. That's the type of data that we need to gather for our federal reporting. And so if you're submitting a proposal that says, we're looking at this program, we're going to use the funds that you give us just to evaluate it and see if it could work in our region, that would not be an eligible project. But if you're providing maybe some planning purposes and year 1 is really going to be about evaluation, year 2 is going to be about implementation, that's a different story. Because at that point you are serving participants, you are providing a solution to the workforce challenge that your region faces, and you are providing activities that can be funded by the grant. And evaluation is just one of those activities, not the sole activity. All right.
Great.
Another question sort of around the evaluation functionality, can a feasibility study be considered eligible? I don't know any. Again, I think it's not your sole activity. And so if that is part of your proposal, I think that that's something that would be compelling and a great way to talk about how this innovative practice could work in your region. But it cannot be the only activity of your proposal. Ray, any different thoughts?
No, I think you're spot on. Again, to that planning purpose of maybe in that first instance, as it informs your strategy, that could perhaps. But I think as you're developing your project solutions, is the feasibility towards a program, or is the feasibility towards demonstrating that your project is going to serve a particular area well, or a particular region well, that might not maybe score as highly, because we're asking you to kind of know that already, to identify your workforce need by region or area and design your program around that. So it's a little tricky.
And I will say, in terms of serving participants, we are hoping that some of that forethought and planning can be provided in the project implementation section of the grant application. Because for those of us who have run programs, time flies, and the numbers that you propose and project of individuals served, those will come up on you very quickly. And so I just want to be clear that our end goal is really to be able to solve these workforce challenges and the individuals who are most impacted by the pandemic. So make sure that really is the emphasis, is on those people served, as that is part of the performance reporting requirements that we are on the hook for to DOL or to the federal government, and therefore applicants and awardees will also be on the hook for.
Great. Speaking of sort of ancillary documents or questions that people want to provide beyond just text in the boxes, is there an opportunity for somebody to share a video, to share charts or pie charts or other data?
I'm going to say there isn't. Just from reviewing round one, there really isn't a chance for that. And I think what you need to be able to demonstrate in your narrative is kind of the whole thing. So I'd say focus on developing your narrative and providing that data. You can source it, certainly, but your narrative needs to stand on its own.
All right. So that answers the video question. What was the other question? Excuse me, just 1 minute. Will you be providing templates for budget or budget narratives?
Yes, that'll be part of you'll see that on the application checklist form that'll go live with the application next Tuesday. Yeah, it's not in the program guide, but the kind of the main questions of the project budget are in there. And so again, those templates will be in that checklist.
All right. One of the general questions too, and I think this would benefit everybody, is a reminder that we are recording this. That includes the questions in the chat that are being sent to me and to everybody. So we'll be able to review that as program leads, as people that work in updating the marketing documents and program guidelines. And additionally, this recording will be on our website by end of day tomorrow. So like I said, the one-stop shop for all information or places to go regarding Wisconsin Innovation Grants is the WDC program website, which I'm going to put in the chat again. All right, just some general thank yous and things, but I think I got most of the questions. Laura, Ray, in the last 4 minutes, let me reiterate that if we didn't get to one of your questions, you can always email us, especially with your feedback or comments. That email address is going to be listed here shortly in the chat, but closing comments from Laura and Ray.
I'll just say thank you in advance for your applications. In round one, we saw some really thoughtful and innovative programs. And like Ray said, it was a very competitive review process. And so please review the rubric, as that's a new resource that's available in round two for everyone to use as you're maybe reviewing a project that was potentially not funded in round one. How can you make it even better and elevate it in round two to receive some higher scores in those areas? We've tried to make these resources available to you and hope that you use them to provide the best application that you possibly can. Ray, anything else?
No, absolutely. Thank you. A lot of work goes into these, and I know it's challenging to put a lot of work into something and to potentially not get funded, but hopefully whatever you're building in your regions, you'll be able to build on regardless of funding in this program. Getting the partners around the table and coming together on some of these things is really the first step. And we should all be proud of the work that you're doing through the pandemic to come out on the other side of it. So thank you for that work.
Well, thank you guys for your work on this, as well as your expertise as we relaunch and do a round two of this. Thank you to the leadership of WDC, DWD, and DOA for their support of this. And I hope everybody has a nice rest of the day. Thanks for your attention and your time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.